I remember several years ago, there was this one WatchMojo.com video. It was top 10 movies that ripped off anime. In it discussed how Nadia, the secret of blue water, was ripped off by Atlantis, the Lost Empire. This was something that always stuck in the back of my mind for a while because I had never heard of Nadia. However, after picking this up at a video store and then watching the whole thing, I wanted to take a closer look to see if that video had any grounds to say that Atlantis was a ripoff. Just a big note before we continue. I'm not going to give away major plot points of either of these pieces of media, but beware that there are spoilers ahead. That out of the way, let's begin. Let's start with a few select scenes that blur the lines a little bit. In this scene, Nadia returns to her birthplace, a mysterious city named Tartessos. Notice the way she walks on the water in an almost trance-like state. Now compare this to when Kiratakash is called to the crystal. These are pretty similar, especially given both characters have dark skin and a mystical crystal around their neck. Now on to another scene. Here, Kira has become the heart of Atlantis and is sent to protect it. Notice the glow. I think this is very similar to when Nadia is communicating with her ancestors. If both scenes were in color, you could see it's a very similar shade of blue. This next scene is from the opening theme song of Nadia. This gives us a glance of what Atlantis looks like. Once again, a similar glow. And note the eye. This looks really close to the letter A at the center of the city. These are just similar scenes though. Let's dive into the mystical crystal that each leading lady wears. In the case of Atlantis, it's a connection to the heart of Atlantis, which has multiple properties. Healing, electricity, levitation, emits a glow stronger than electric light, as well as giving the wearer a long lifespan. It is said to be alive in a ways, and has been used as a great weapon. This is ultimately what led to Atlantis being submerged. Now onto Nadia's stone, which actually has a name, the blue water. The crystal will flash red when the wearer is in danger, grants the wearer the ability to talk to animals, and acts as a key for Atlantean cities. In this story there are 3 kingdoms: Atlantis, Tartessos, and Red Noah. The blue water also protects the wearer from harm. How is very vague, but we see for certain it can levitate the wearer. At the very end of the series, it's hinted at that the blue water is also a connection to their god, and maybe the rulers of the past? The only other thing to note is that the blue water is about as hard, if not harder than diamond, as it can cut through anything. So what about Atlantis itself? Let's start with Nadia. As mentioned before, only a user of the blue water can enter the Atlantean cities. As you would expect, Atlantis itself is underwater, but how it's dry is very confusing. Atlantis itself is dead. An instrument known as the Tower of Babel destroyed most of it, and most of the Atlanteans died because of it. Fun thing to note is that the Tower of Babel also comes up in Atlantis, the Lost Empire.
How do they know all these languages?
Their language must be based on a root dialect, just like the Tower of Babel.
In Atlantis, it is still very much alive. However, years of isolation, as well as the old dying out, is leaving behind a massive legacy. For example, the art of reading Atlantean has been lost. As for how the crew gets there, simply put, there is an air pocket under the water that Atlantis resides in. However, getting there is not easy. In the water is a guardian only known as the Leviathan. Once there, the road to Atlantis has many twists, turns, weather patterns, traps, and just outside the city is a dormant volcano. Let's dive into the characters. Now what's surprising is that both have a rather unique and diverse cast. For Atlantis, the crew is all united to discover the Lost Empire, while in Nadia, the crew is united to destroy the villain. Once again, really not trying to spoil too much here? However, I will get more specific and talk about the main characters of each. Let's do a side-by-side first. Notice how Milo and Jean not only have a similar hairstyle, the same glasses. This is really just scratching the surface. The first major difference between the two are their ages. Jean is 15. While Milo isn't explicitly said, I think it's safe to say he's in his 20s. While both give off the air of brilliance, their fields of study are vastly different. Jean is an inventor, with a particular love for lighter-than aircraft. However, he is known to dabble in other sciences, such as astronomy. Milo's expertise lies in the study of languages, history, and culture, most likely inherited from his adventure-loving grandfather. Come to think of it, that's another similarity right there. Both of them didn't have their parents for very long, and were thus raised by different relatives. To get back on track, though, Milo is more book-smart, although he knows a few things about mechanics. Then we jump into Nadia. She is an orphan who found a living in the circus, explaining her agility and balance. With having no human friends, she develops a relationship with animals, so much so that she refuses to eat meat. Plus, seeing a few of her animal companions killed, she finds life, even in evil, to be very precious. Being orphaned, she doesn't know where she came from, but due to her dark skin, thinks it's gotta be somewhere in Africa. As the series goes on, Nadia starts to unlock the powers of the blue water, which I mentioned already. Kidatakash, or just Kita, was born and raised in Atlantis and is actually a Disney princess. Her father is still alive and rules over Atlantis. However, the mother was taken away from her at a very young age. She was called to the crystal in order to protect the city from the Mebilmoth, or Great Flood. While her father doesn't want outsiders, Kita is very interested to see what the world on the outside is like. Plus, Milo's knowledge of Atlantean gives her a perspective of her own culture. Comparing the characters side by side is very difficult as there isn't a 1-to-1 ratio. You could maybe compare Miss Granva with Helga Sinclair, as both are women of action who are not afraid to get their hands dirty. But that's about it. Before concluding, I figure I'll give a basic summary of both pieces of media. Let's start with Atlantis, as it's a lot shorter than the epic of Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water. We start with a brief explanation of how Atlantis sunk beneath the waves and how Kita lost her mother. We then jump to the year 1914, where Milo is busy giving a pitch to finance an expedition to Atlantis. However, it's just practice, as the gentleman of the board thinks he's absolutely nuts. Another day of failure, he goes home to his cat, but instead finds Helga. She is working on behalf of her employer, Preston Whitmore, a longtime friend of Milo's grandfather. He gives Milo the Shepherd's Journal, the only text to explain the way to Atlantis. From there, it's discovered that when Thaddeus brought back the journal to Whitmore, he lost a bet, and thus he finances the expedition out of his own pocket. The journey seems to go smoothly until the ship is attacked by the city's guardian, the Leviathan. Quick tangent, Milo references the Bible when describing this monster. In Nadia, there are too many biblical references to count. What's left of the crew then make the treacherous journey to Atlantis. From there, the gang explores the still-living city in hopes to find the heart of Atlantis. They are successful, however this comes at the cost of Kita becoming the crystal itself. More than that would be spoiler territory. Now on to the great saga of Nadia. If you thought I abridged Atlantis, you've seen nothing yet. The year is 1889, and two major events are going on. A World's Fair in Paris, and rumors of a sea monster attacking innocent ships. Enter Jean, a young inventor with hopes of winning the amateur flying competition. Before he can make it, though, he is distracted by a lovely young girl wearing a priceless gem. Enter Miss Granva and her henchmen ready to steal it. Jean is able to help Nadia escape to the safety of her big top. That is until Miss Granva forges the identity of being Nadia's long-lost sister. Jean swipes her away only to be pursued by Miss Granva's super tank. The pair manage to escape to Jean's workshop. There, they get to talking, and Jean wants to grant her one wish, to see her birthplace. They both guess it's Africa, and use one of Jean's planes to get there. The takeoff is rough, as Miss Granva spots them and attempts to take them down. However, that gets taken care of later, as Jean is still learning about motors. They are picked up by an American ship on the hunt of the sea monster. Now, if you've read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or watched the Disney movie, you already know what happens next. The ship encounters the monster, Nadia and Jean are thrown overboard, are picked up by the Nautilus, and become temporary crew members. There are two major differences from the book, though. First is the addition of another monster. Also, Jean and Nadia only remain on the ship for a few days before they are sent to a nearby island. What Captain Nemo thought of as a safe island turned out to be the headquarters of a cult led by the ruthless Gargoyle. His goal is to create an awesome weapon from Atlantis, known as the Tower of Babel. There is only one thing that will make it run properly, though: Nadia's blue water. There is a struggle, but ultimately the tower malfunctions, destroying the weapon, and in the confusion, the pair make it back to the Nautilus. They also pick up a little girl from the island named Marie, whose parents were killed by the Neo-Atlanteans. Miss Granva and her goons were also on the island and made a pact with Jean to escape, but also to get Nadia back. From there, the recent crew members try their best to fit in, while the original crew is on the search for Gargoyle. There were a few encounters, which lead to two stops: what's left of Atlantis to bury the dead, and the home base on the South Pole. There, Nadia speaks with a whale, who says she will meet with her brother. After this, the Nautilus is met with a devastating attack. Miss Granva and her goons attempt to fight back, but ultimately lose control over the flying tank and disappear. Jean, Nadia, and Marie are evacuated in an escape pod, all while the rest of the crew go down with the ship. Jean and Nadia start to build a close relationship on a deserted island when another one floats by. On this island is Miss Granva and her goons, as well as a crew member of the American battleship. It's discovered that this island is another relic left by the Atlanteans. With the power of the blue water, Nadia is told of her birthplace, as well as her destiny. The relic is what's known as Red Noah, and is something the New Atlanteans have been searching for quite a long time. With Miss Granva's fantastic tank repaired, everybody gets off before a gargoyle ship follows Red Noah to the briny deeps. The gang flies to Africa to look for the ancient city of Tartessos, Nadia's birthplace. Here, Nadia has total control of the city, as well as tormented by all the dead that used to walk within its walls. After recovering herself, she finds a stone that talks about Nadia's birthday, and it also states she is the rightful heir to the throne. More than that, I feel like would be spoiler territory. In fact, I might have spoiled a few things along the way just saying that. Well, that's all the cards on the table. I'll leave you as the viewer to decide if Atlantis really did rip off Nadia the Secret of Blue Water. If you were to ask me personally, though, I say no. There are similarities, yes, but I feel like there isn't a 1-to-1 ratio like I was led to believe with the WatchMojo.com video. True, both are adventure stories, involve submarines going underwater, Atlantis, and crystal technology. But how both medias decide to tell this story are completely different ways. Or at least, in my opinion. How about you leave in the comments what you think? Before concluding, I figured I would give you one little bonus fact. So it's been said that the character of Commander Rourke was based off of Howard Rourke from The Fountainhead. Well, I've read the book, and in all honesty, I can't see the connection. Howard Rourke was an architect, and the main thing about him is he refuses to compromise. He has a set vision as to how he wants to make an architectural project, and it has to go that way 100%. If it doesn't, he'll pull out, even at the idea of losing his own business, as well as losing a ton of money just because he refused to compromise. If somehow you've read The Fountainhead and watched Atlantis the Lost Empire, what do you think? So then, until next time, keep having fun.